The key turned with a groan like the building was sighing before letting me in. Rust flaked off the knob. The wood of the garage door cracked like it had held its breath for 20 years. When I pushed it open, a gust of dust and silence spilled out, curling around my legs like fog. I didn't move right away. I just stood there, blinking at the shadows. This was it. My inheritance. A decaying garage no one wanted. They laughed when I got it. But you won't believe what I found inside. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Because the truth buried in this broken garage changes everything. A collapsing single-door garage tucked behind an overgrown yard at the edge of nowhere. It leaned like a drunk against a dead elm. No power, no lock but the one on the front. The roof sagged like an apology. My cousin Lily had burst into laughter when the lawyer said it aloud. Wait, she gets the garage. Then to me. Well, congratulations. You're now the proud owner of asbestos and broken dreams. No one corrected her. Not even my mother. She just pressed her lips into that familiar quiet line and adjusted her pearl earrings. Well, she said with a brittle smile, your grandfather always did have peculiar affections. Peculiar affections. That was their code for me. The scent inside the garage was something between rust sap and old oil. It filled my lungs like memory. There were boxes stacked haphazardly, broken crates, a shelf of jam jars filled with God knows what. A tarp draped over something large and lumpy in the back corner. Cobwebs laced the ceiling like lace from a forgotten wedding. And in the middle of it all, a wooden workbench, scored, burned, familiar. I used to sit on the edge of it when I was 7, swinging my legs while Grandpa soldered wires together, muttering to himself. You know what people forget, kiddo, he'd say, not looking up. The future's built in silence, while the rest of the world's too busy laughing. They never listened to him. They never listened to me either. At the will reading, I was the last name called. Even the family dog was mentioned before me. Max the golden retriever got a savings bond and a custom urn. I got a brass key in a plain white envelope. No note, no explanation, just a key. Is that a joke, my uncle asked. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Braddock was very specific. That part was true. My grandfather had been a stubborn man, brilliant, yes, but distant, quiet, unassuming. He spent more time with machines than with people, which meant he and I got along just fine. He wasn't warm, but he was fair. And for some reason, when no one else saw anything in me, he did. I stepped into the garage fully now, feeling the creak of wood beneath my boots. There were no birthday cards, no cash, no envelopes with instructions, just dust, silence, and a faint ticking. I paused, tilted my head. It was coming from the wall. On the back panel behind the workbench, half covered in a smear of oil, hung a yellowing blueprint. I brushed at it, and the paper crinkled. Mechanical schematics, gears, cogs, some sort of circuit design. At the bottom right corner, a signature. W.B. Braddock, Grandpa. And beside it, another name. E.C. Latham. The name jolted something loose in my brain. I'd heard it before, maybe on the news. A TED Talk. It didn't matter. My fingers hovered over the paper. Something deep in my chest stirred like an old engine trying to turn over. I sat on the workbench and pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course. I looked around again, this time with intention. What had I missed? There were stacks of wooden boxes marked misc and scrap, a milk crate full of faded Polaroids. And then under the bench, something caught my eye. A small locked drawer. Steel, built into the wood. The padlock was old but intact. It wasn't even rusted. This was intentional. Grandpa had wanted this part sealed, kept from strangers. Maybe kept from my family. My hand tightened around the key in my pocket, but it wasn't the right shape. I stayed there until sunset, didn't touch anything else, just sat. Let the dust settle around me, let the silence speak. For the first time in years, I didn't feel embarrassed by the quiet. I felt trusted. That night back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I looked up Edward C. Latham. My blood went cold. He was a CEO now of Stratosyn, a billion-dollar tech company specializing in energy-efficient mechanical systems. His earliest invention, the Latham coil, was patented in 2004. Revolutionary, they said, the foundation of the company's fortune. The design on the homepage nearly identical to the blueprint I saw in Grandpa's garage. I stared at my ceiling fans spinning slowly overhead. Was it a coincidence? Was it theft? Or had my grandfather built something brilliant, only to be erased? And if so, why leave it to me? They all thought I inherited nothing. They laughed, shrugged, moved on. But I think he knew. He knew I wouldn't laugh. He knew I'd look closer. And now that I have, I'm not letting it go. Not until the truth sees daylight. Not until the garage stops whispering. The next morning, I returned with gloves, a headlamp, and a crowbar. Not because I was ready to break something open, but because I needed to know who else had tried. The garage felt colder than the day before. Still, heavy, like it was waiting. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. The light from the window cut a diagonal slash across the dust in the air. For a second, it looked like fog in an old war film, the kind Grandpa used to watch on mute. I crouched beside the workbench and studied the drawer again. The padlock wasn't rusted, but the latch had fine scratches on it. Not random ones, deliberate. Someone had tried to pick it, but not recently. There was a mark, a faint L, etched into the side. Lily. My cousin used to sneak around the house when we were kids trying to break into things Grandpa told us to leave alone. He once found her in the garage trying to pry open an old coffee tin. He didn't scold her, just looked at me and said, "That's the difference between wanting to know and deserving to." I didn't say anything. I just watched her put the tin back. And for the first time I realized he wasn't keeping things from us. He was testing us. I dusted off the top of the workbench, ran my gloved hand across the burn marks and old coffee rings. Everything about this place felt like it had a heartbeat, like it was trying to remember something, or maybe trying to be remembered. Tucked behind the back leg of the bench, I found something unexpected. A folded canvas satchel wrapped in a plastic bag. Inside, a small leather notebook and a metal key that didn't match the padlock. I sat on the floor and opened the notebook. It was filled with diagrams. Not just machine parts, but timestamps, formulas, sketches of coil systems. Some pages were torn, others marked with a red X. And at the bottom of every page, small notations in a script I recognized from grocery lists stuck on my childhood fridge. Too loud. Burned out after 12 minori, need copper core. Don't show Latham. Underlined twice. My breath caught. Don't show Latham. He'd trusted him once, but not always. Something had happened, something bad enough to make him start hiding his notes. I flipped to the very back. There, in a different handwriting, looser, almost rushed, was a list titled, "If I'm Not Around Anymore." 1. Don't trust anyone who wants the garage. 2. Don't throw out the broken tape recorder. 3. If the left wall creaks twice, stop everything. 4. The safe key is not in here. 5. Ask for Leo Shore. The last line had a date next to it. October 2004. Same year the Latham coil was patented. I walked to the back of the garage where the tarp covered that lump in the corner, pulled it off gently. The dust billowed like an exhale. Underneath an old metal locker, the kind you'd see in a 1950s high school hallway. Inside, nothing at first glance. Then I spotted it, a dusty tape recorder sitting atop a pile of bundled extension cords. It didn't look remarkable, but on its side a note was taped. "It only sounds broken." I took it to the workbench, slid in a battery from my flashlight, hit play. At first static, then a cough, metal scraping, then Grandpa's voice low and gruff like he was speaking through gauze. Test log 42, the third coil's unstable. Latham says it's solved, but he's rushing. Doesn't care about heat bleed. Just wants signatures. Patent office in 2 weeks. Told him I'm out if he files without the tests. He laughed. A click. Silence. Then another entry. Test log 43. He filed. Behind my back. Called it the Latham coil. Then silence. I sat there listening over and over until my thumb went numb on the rewind button. I stared at the notebook again. The name at the bottom, Leo Shore. I remembered it vaguely. Grandpa's friend from when I was small. A man who smelled like tobacco and always had oil under his fingernails. I opened my laptop and typed Leo Shore, mechanical engineer Braddock. Nothing useful. Tried Leo Shore plus Latham plus coil. Still nothing. Then I remembered Grandpa never used full names in phone books. He hated them. I reached under the workbench, opened the old Rolodex. LS. The card read, Leo still has the files. Don't forget the handshake. And below that, a phone number, a landline. I called. The line rang. And rang. Then an answering machine clicked on. You've reached Leo. If you're selling something, I'm not interested. If you're calling about Walter Braddock, leave a message. And don't lie. Beep. I swallowed. My name is Claire. I'm Walter's granddaughter. I found something. I think you need to see it. I hung up. And just sat there, hands still on the phone, wondering what I'd just stepped into. Outside, the sun was setting again. 2 days in a row I'd forgotten lunch. I closed the garage, locked it carefully, and glanced once over my shoulder. For something so broken, it suddenly felt like the most protected place in my life. That night, Leo called back. You sound like him, he said without saying hello. Meet me tomorrow. Don't bring anyone. And don't mention Latham over the phone again. The line went dead. Leo Shore lived in a red brick duplex that looked like it hadn't been dusted since Clinton left office. His mailbox was dented. The porch light flickered, but the man who opened the door was sharp-eyed, stiff-backed, and not nearly as old as I remembered. He didn't smile, didn't even say hello. He just looked me up and down and muttered, "So." The garage finally opened. He let me in without another word. The living room smelled like metal polish and unsaid things. Files were stacked in every corner. Schematics pinned to corkboards. Half-finished gadgets littered the kitchen counter. Leo pointed to the couch. I sat. He sat across from me in a chair that creaked like it had been waiting decades for someone to talk. You know what you're holding, right? He said. I nodded slowly. I think so. But I don't know the whole story. No, you don't. Then he leaned forward and began. Walter Braddock. My grandfather wasn't just a tinkerer. He was a systems engineer who'd walked away from a Fortune 100 job after refusing to fake a safety report. He'd spent the rest of his life building clean energy models in his garage. And the Latham coil that was yours truly, and your granddad Leo said. 30-40 iterations, endless testing. Your mom was still in high school. He paused as if measuring how much to tell me. Walt didn't care about fame. He wanted the thing to really work. But Latham, he wanted flash, speed, and money. Always money. I pulled the notebook from my satchel and handed it to him. He flipped through it like a priest thumbing a well-worn Bible. His face softened, then tightened. He never showed me this, Leo said, and I was the one who warned him. Told him Latham couldn't be trusted. The deal had been simple. They'd file for joint patent rights. Latham had the money and the lawyers. Grandpa had the design and the proof of concept. But just before filing, Grandpa fell ill with a respiratory infection that knocked him out for weeks. When he came to, the papers had already been submitted. Latham's name and only his. Walt could have sued, Leo said. Had all the documents, the logs, the iterations. Why didn't he? I asked. Leo didn't answer right away. He pulled out a yellow folder from a nearby drawer and tossed it on the table. Inside, photos, notes. One of them was a letter from Stratison Tech's legal team threatening a countersuit for defamation, breach of contract, and unauthorized use of proprietary designs. They scared him, Leo said. Scared his family. Your mother. She begged him to drop it. I stared at the paper. The tone wasn't legal, it was personal, almost vicious. He thought he could live with it, Leo said. He thought justice would catch up. But it didn't, I whispered. Leo shook his head. No, it never does. Unless someone pushes it from behind. We sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood cross to a cabinet and pulled out a metal lockbox. He opened it, revealing a stack of dusty tapes and a single unmarked flash drive. These are your grandfather's backups, audio logs, prototypes, financial records. He hid them here after the garage got too risky. Too risky, I asked. Leo looked at me, his eyes narrowing. There was a break-in, years ago, nothing stolen. But the blueprint went missing, the original one. I always suspected someone in your family tipped off Latham. My stomach dropped. Why would they do that? Because the moment Walt made a claim, they all stood to lose. The payout Latham offered to keep things quiet. It didn't go to Walt. He paused. It went to someone else. I didn't speak. My chest felt tight. Suddenly the laughter at the will reading didn't sound so casual. Suddenly the garage wasn't just forgotten, it was silenced. On purpose. Leo handed me the flash drive. Everything on here. It's enough to reopen the case. Enough to force Stratison Tech to acknowledge co-inventorship. But if you move forward, Claire, you need to be ready. Ready for what? For them to come for you. The company. And maybe... He paused again, slower this time. People with your last name. I nodded. I already opened the garage, Leo. There's no going back. He finally smiled. Just a little. He'd be proud, you know. You were the only one who ever asked how the machines worked, not what they were worth. I stood to leave. My bag is heavier now, not just with evidence but with weight. Thank you, I said. Leo looked out the window, voice quiet. Don't thank me yet. Just don't let them rewrite his story again. That night I didn't sleep. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and copied every file to 3 separate devices. Then I printed the letters, the schematics, the timelines. I started building a folder not just of blueprints but of betrayal. And as I worked, I realized something. I wasn't just reclaiming his legacy. I was protecting mine. The box was buried beneath the floorboards. I wouldn't have found it if I hadn't dropped my flashlight. It rolled under the workbench and thudded against something hollow. I pulled up the first board with a crowbar, and there it was, wrapped in canvas, sealed with old twine. A shoebox-sized container. No lock, no label. Just a smell, paper dust, and something older, like grief. I sat cross-legged on the floor of the garage and untied it slowly. Inside, a stack of letters. All addressed, all unsent, all written in my grandfather's hand. The first one was dated September 11th, 2004. Edward, I've tried calling. I've tried writing. I know what you've done. Filing behind my back wasn't just dishonest, it was cruel. You stole the work we built together and now you parade it like you invented it alone. I want my name off it. Or I go public. W. The second letter was shorter. Edward. My family is being threatened. I know it came from your office. If I lose my daughter's trust over this, I will make it my life's work to undo you. Then there were 5 more. Longer, sadder, calmer. Like a man watching the world forget him 1 week at a time. This used to be about fairness. Now it's about dignity. I walked away from money. I won't walk away from the truth. You can erase my name, Edward, but you won't erase my work. She'll see it someday. That one stopped me cold. She'll see it someday. I looked through the rest. Most were addressed to Latham. One was addressed to L.S. Leo Shore. I set it aside. Then I found it. A cream-colored envelope. No stamp, no address. Just a name written in neat pressed script. Claire. My fingers trembled slightly. I unfolded it carefully. Claire. If you're reading this, it means the garage finally spoke to you. I never explained things well. I didn't say enough. Not to your mother, not to you. But I saw you. even when no one else did. I saw how you watched the gears turn, how you listened more than you spoke. This world doesn't reward quiet minds, but it needs them. I didn't give you money, I gave you the story, the bones of a truth that someone tried to bury. I couldn't make them tell it, but maybe you can. With care, W.B. Braddock. I read it twice, then a third time. The paper shook in my hands and I realized it wasn't the cold. No one had ever written to me like that before. No one had ever believed I could carry something, not just a task, but a legacy. I sat on the garage floor for a long time, surrounded by silence and letters no one ever read. I thought of the will reading, the smirks. The key is in the envelope. And I realized that wasn't a consolation prize. It was a test of character, one that only I was supposed to pass. There was one last envelope, thick and unsealed. Inside, a copy of the original patent paperwork with both signatures. Walter Braddock, Edward C. Latham, and a sticky note filed together, replaced before final submission. He had proof, all along. I added the envelope to the folder I'd begun compiling in my apartment. Printed out emails, timeline spreadsheets, press clippings, product comparisons between the original coil and the Latham coil. I labeled it all Project Braddock, but the most important piece wasn't the proof, it was the pattern. Every attempt Grandpa made to reach Edward was ignored. Every warning to his family, dismissed. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure, and it wasn't complete, because now I had the missing chapters. That evening I emailed Leo. Found the letters. He wrote to me. "We need to talk next steps." He replied 5 minutes later. "Be at my place tomorrow. Bring the documents. We're going to court." I closed my laptop, locked the garage, and stood on the porch for a while. The night was quiet. No wind, no cars. Only the hum of what I now understood, not a ruin, but a resurrection. The thing about building a case is no one sees you coming. Not when you don't raise your voice. Not when you smile politely at family dinners and say, "I'm fine." Not when you're the girl who inherited a garage full of dust instead of a check. They think you've accepted your place. But I hadn't. Leo connected me with a woman named Janet Ames, a patent attorney from Chicago, with a background in mechanical systems and a reputation for bulldog litigation. Sharp as a tack, he said, and allergic to bull. We met over Zoom the next evening. Her hair was silver, tied back tightly. Her voice was even tighter. I showed her the signed patent drafts, the schematic matches-ups, the audio tapes. The time-stamped lab notes are in my grandfather's handwriting. She listened, didn't flinch. "This isn't just misattribution," she said finally. "This is intellectual theft, with a paper trail long enough to bury a man." I looked into the camera. They buried the wrong one. She tapped her pen against her teeth, thoughtful. "We can challenge the patent, subpoena Latham's files, demand co-inventorship and posthumous credit. But you'll need more." "More?" I asked. "A motive, a cover-up, a reason why he was silenced and who benefited. If you can tie it to financial gain or obstruction of inheritance." She trailed off. But I understood. "Someone on the inside," I said. Janet nodded. "You said it. Not me." That sentence stuck in my mind like a burr under skin. Later that night, I opened my email and scrolled through archive threads from the family inbox, the kind everyone's CC'd on, but no one ever reads closely. Photos of grandkids, leftover holiday plans, church flyers. But buried in the thread from 6 months ago, just 2 weeks after Grandpa died, I found one. From my mother, to my uncle, aunt, cousin Lily. I told Dad we should have just accepted the buyout when we had the chance. It was generous. Now it's too late and that girl has the key. That girl, me. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Buyout. I forwarded the email to Leo. He called within 2 minutes. That's it. They knew. At least she did. Ask her about 2005. There was a check. Walt refused it. But someone else cashed it. The next morning I went to see my mother. She answered the door in a silk robe and pearls like she hadn't aged since 1999. She was perfectly composed as always. She offered me tea as always. I declined. Instead, I placed the printout of the email on the table between us, along with the patent copy bearing only Latham's name. She didn't reach for them, didn't speak, just folded her hands like a woman bracing for impact. "You opened the garage," she said flatly. "You knew I would." She looked away. "Claire, we did what we thought was best." "For who?" "For your grandfather. He was tired. We were being threatened. The company made it clear if he pursued it, they'd drag everything through court. So you let them erase him." He agreed to step back. He agreed, or he was cornered. Her mouth tightened, but she said nothing. I leaned in. "You cashed the check, didn't you?" She blinked once, slowly. "I convinced him not to sue. When he refused the offer, they gave it to me. To keep things quiet." "How much?" 200,000. It wasn't the number that struck me. It was the way she said it, like it was a fact. Like a weather report. Like something that just happened. I stood. She didn't stop me. At the door, she said, "Claire, this case, it won't bring him back. It's not about bringing him back. It's about not letting him disappear, even if it destroys what's left of this family. Maybe it should." Back at my apartment, I pulled out the manila folder I'd been building. I labeled a new tab, Family Collusion. I placed the check scan inside, dated July 8, 2005. Payable to Evelyn Braddock, Memo Consulting, Energy IP Division. My stomach churned. I remembered being 14, at a birthday dinner. Grandpa wasn't there, recovering from pneumonia, they said, but everyone else was. My mother gave a toast about honoring the legacy of good decisions. Everyone clapped. Back then, I thought she meant our family's ethics. Now I realized she meant compliance. I added more to the file. A comparison of Grandpa's coil versus the Latham version, the original patent timeline. The break in the report from 2006 was quietly filed. No items were listed as stolen, just paperwork missing. I stared at the file like it was a living thing, not a folder, a reckoning. That night, an anonymous email hit my inbox. Subject line, "You want to open this can of worms?" Nobody, no attachments, just the threat. I forwarded it to Janet. She called immediately. "They're watching. You're over the target. What should I do?" "Exactly what you're doing. Keep going." I closed the laptop. Then did something I hadn't done in 10 years. I cleared a wall in my apartment. Taped up blueprints, email printouts, faces, flowcharts, arrows, timelines. And in the middle, I pinned the last photo I ever took with Grandpa. He was holding a soldering iron. I was 13. He was looking at the machine. I was looking at him. For a long moment, I just stood there. Not as a granddaughter, not as the girl who got the garage, but as the only one who didn't flinch. The invitation came in an embossed envelope. No return address. Just a name, Jonathan Keene Partner, Whitlow, Baxter and Keene, LLP. Inside, a single line typed in black ink, "Ms. Braddock. We believe it's in our mutual interest to discuss this matter in person. Thursday, 11:30 a.m. Private conference room, 31st floor. No recording devices." Beneath it, a handwritten note. "We prefer discretion over litigation." Janet read it twice, then held it up to the light like a detective. "They're scared. Or they're bluffing. Either way, this isn't just about money anymore. You think they'll offer a settlement? They'll offer silence wrapped in gold leaf." Thursday arrived with cold rain and a heavier silence than usual. I wore navy blue neutral professional. No jewelry, no makeup, but concealer. A file folder under my arm. A steel pen in my coat pocket. Just in case I needed to sign anything, or stab, metaphorically. The Whitlow building rose above the city like it knew it was untouchable. I walked through polished glass doors into a marble lobby so quiet I could hear my heartbeat. A receptionist led me to the elevator, then to a hallway. then to a small windowless room. At the far end sat Jonathan Keene, mid-50s, jaw like a knife blade, smile like a contract clause. He stood as I entered, offered a handshake. I didn't take it. He gestured to the seat across from him. I sat, opened my folder. He didn't glance down. Ms. Braddock, first of all, thank you for coming. I'm not here to be thanked. Of course. Let's call this what it is, a courtesy. I said nothing. He continued, folding his hands like a priest. We're aware of the materials in your possession, and of your intentions. I intend to correct the record. That's one way to frame it. It's the truthful way. He smiled, slow and deliberate. Ms. Braddock, I'm not here to debate. I'm here to offer a resolution. Quietly, respectfully. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick white envelope, slid it across the table. I didn't touch it. What is this? I asked. A settlement. In exchange for full non-disclosure, the Braddock name will be acknowledged in the internal archives of Stratosyn Tech, and a financial sum was awarded. Substantial. How substantial? 7 figures. I blinked. Once. But didn't flinch. And what about the patent that stays as is? Then we're not resolving anything. He leaned forward slightly. Claire. May I call you Claire? No. He sighed. Ms. Braddock, do you understand what happens if this goes public? There will be inquiries, lawsuits, media frenzy. Your name was dragged through counterclaims and misunderstandings until the original story drowned. We both know courts don't reward legacy, they reward precision. Then you should be worried, because my file is very precise. He glanced down for the first time, saw the word collusion in bold on the folder's tab. He looked back at me. The smile had dropped slightly. We're offering you dignity. No, you're offering me silence. Dignity I already have. Then let me offer you a final warning. He tapped the envelope. If you walk out with that unopened, this becomes war. We file a motion to dismiss. You get buried in paperwork for 3 years. Your family gets subpoenaed. Your private life goes on trial. You mean like my grandfather's life did, without anyone ever knowing silence. He looked at me carefully. You are your grandfather's granddaughter. Yes, I said. And that should terrify you. I stood, picked up my folder, left the envelope untouched. As I reached the door, he said one last thing. There are other costs you haven't considered. I turned slowly. Then start calculating interest. It's overdue. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the wind had picked up. I walked 10 blocks before I let myself breathe. Then I ducked into a bookstore cafe, ordered a coffee, and opened my laptop. Typed a short email to Janet, meeting done. Offer declined. Prepare for public filing. Attached. All correspondences. Meeting transcript. Yes, I had recorded it. My watch had a mic. Screenshot of the folder tab. Patent dispute. Braddock v. Latham. Before I left, I ordered a second coffee to go. I wrote on the cup in Sharpie, for the one they forgot to mention. I didn't know who'd find it, but I left it on the courthouse steps. They say the truth will set you free. But first, it tends to make everyone very uncomfortable. The day we filed, I wore the same navy blazer I wore to my grandfather's funeral. Not out of sentiment, out of calculation. People underestimate a woman in the Navy. They think you're quiet, cautious, reasonable. That's fine with me. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood. Janet walked beside me, a stack of binders under one arm, her expression carved from stone. Calm, exact. A war general in heels. We weren't suing for money. We were suing for a correction. A name. A place in the record. A motion to formally recognize Walter B. Braddock as co-inventor of the Latham coil, and to investigate fraud in the original patent filing. Stratosyn Tech responded within 72 hours. 3 motions to dismiss. 2 cease threats. 1 vaguely worded press release that called our claims a deeply unfortunate attempt to tarnish decades of innovation with sentimental revisionism. They called me a grieving granddaughter clinging to myth. That part made me laugh. Until I saw the interview my mother gave on Channel 7. She wore pearls and a beige blazer. She always did in moments like these when she wanted to look neutral. My father was a brilliant man, she said, dabbing her eyes for effect. But not everything he built was meant for the public eye. The words were cold, rehearsed. She hadn't said my name, not once. The hearing was set for Tuesday. I arrived early. There was already a line of reporters outside, camped with microphones and hungry eyes. One of them yelled, "Claire, do you want the patent or the payout?" I didn't answer, just walked inside. Courtroom 3B was larger than I expected. The walls rose high, paneled in walnut with flags at both ends. It looked like a place where things were decided then forgotten. Mira Hall. Stratosyntek's lead counsel arrived flanked by 2 junior associates and a man I recognized from the company's board. They didn't look at me, didn't need to. I was the problem, the one they thought they'd buried with a brass key in a dusty garage. The judge entered. She was older, clear-eyed, wore her robe like a second skin. When she called the case number, my knees went a little soft, not from fear, but from weight. The weight of standing where no one thought I would. Janet opened first. Her voice was calm, clipped, but magnetic. "Your Honor, we are here to request that the U.S. Patent Office formally acknowledge Walter Braddock's role in the original Latham coil design filed in 2004. We provide here over 300 pages of documentation, including dated schematics, audio logs, witness statements, and correspondence." The judge raised a hand. "We'll get to the evidence. For now, tell me why now." Janet didn't miss a beat. "Because the person most invested in the truth wasn't invited to the conversation until now." Mira stood next. She wore a silk blouse the color of steel and smiled like she was used to winning. "Your Honor, my client respects the memory of Mr. Braddock. However, what is being presented here is hearsay nostalgia and circumstantial material at best. The patent was filed by Edward C. Latham following rigorous requirements. If Mr. Braddock had an issue with this, he had every opportunity to challenge it during his lifetime." She turned toward me just slightly. "Emotions are not evidence. Sentiment is not science." Then Janet dropped the first twist. "We agree, which is why we're submitting this." She held up a signed page visibly yellowed with time. An early draft, initialed by both Mr. Latham and Mr. Braddock, dated February 2002. The design is 87% identical to the final patent filed under Latham's sole name. The judge took the copy, reading silently. Mira's jaw twitched. "We also submit the testimony of one Colin Rivera, an engineering intern at the time, who saw Mr. Latham at the Braddock residence garage, despite sworn statements from Mr. Latham denying he had ever been there." The silence was loud. So was the rustle of the press gallery taking notes. The judge leaned back. "Ms. Hall, you'll want to respond to this before I decide on discovery." Mira asked for a recess. It was granted. In the hallway, I sat on a bench beside Janet, drinking from a paper cup of vending machine coffee. My hands trembled, but not from nerves, from memory. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting in that garage, legs swinging off the workbench, while Grandpa worked on something with copper wire and a handheld soldering tool. "You know what makes an idea real, kiddo?" he asked, not looking up. "What?" "Not the applause, not the patent, not the suit with a Harvard degree. Then what?" He touched the coil gently. "The part no one sees." Back in the courtroom, the judge reconvened. Janet stood again. "One more submission, Your Honor. An email retrieved from internal Stratosyntek servers sent in 2005 from Whitlow, Baxter, and Keene to Evelyn Braddock, referencing a financial consulting payout following the coil's private acquisition." The room shifted. Even Mira seemed briefly off balance. This suggests direct knowledge of the transaction, an intentional rerouting of attribution. And then came the twist. Not from us, but from an anonymous email Janet had received at midnight. Printed, one page, no return. It read, "Check Archive Box 47B, Basement Records. There's a memo signed E.L., approving suppression of dual attribution. Braddock was right. It was signed only, "Still believe in silence, but not lies." The judge glanced at the paper, then at us. "I'll be granting a motion to compel discovery and opening a preliminary review into patent fraud." Mira objected. Denied. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters yelled questions. I ignored them, until I saw her, standing by the steps. My mother. She didn't wave, didn't approach, but her face had lost its usual chill. She looked at me the way people look at stained glass from the outside, like they're only just realizing the image was always there, they just never stood in the right light. That night, I returned home, and for the first time I pinned Grandpa's blueprint on my wall. Not in a folder, not in a drawer, but in the open, where it belonged. It arrived 2 days after the hearing. No return address, no markings, just a wax seal, black cracked slightly at the edge, pressed into thick cream-colored paper. Old school, deliberate. Inside a note, folded twice, handwritten in a script I hadn't seen in years. There were only 3 lines. "He didn't want to go quietly. He left you something I couldn't hide forever. Box 14C. Beneath the false bottom." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting unmistakable. Aunt Marion. Marion Braddock wasn't technically my aunt. She was Grandpa's sister. The only one in the family who had a mechanical mind that rivaled his, and the only one who had disappeared from every family event after 2010. I remember the whispers. "She's gone strange, still tinkering with junk, doesn't even have a TV. She lived in a cabin 2 hours north near the state line. No cell service, no email, no digital footprint beyond a P.O. box, and the occasional paper letter at Christmas." I drove up the next morning. The road curved like a question through pine trees and fog. The GPS cut out halfway there. By the time I reached the gravel driveway, my hands were stiff from gripping the wheel too tightly. Her house was still the same cedar panels, a wind chime made of wrenches, and a doormat that read, "Wipe your mind." I knocked. Once. The door creaked open on its own. She stood there barefoot, holding a soldering iron like it was an extension of her body. "Took you long enough," she said. Inside, the place smelled like metal filings and tea. She led me through a room cluttered with tools, half-built drones, and stacks of popular mechanics dating back to the 90s. She didn't say much, just motioned to a dusty file cabinet near the back of the room. Third drawer. False bottom. I knelt, pulled the drawer open. Paper, receipts, old maps. Then I felt it, a subtle lip of wood. I pressed, clicked. The false bottom lifted like a secret. Beneath it, a manila envelope, a black USB drive, and a folded letter addressed simply to my granddaughter. I didn't read it right away. I sat with it in my lap, like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. Marion sat across from me, arms folded, watching. "He told me not to give it to anyone unless you came looking. Said if you showed up, it meant you were ready." Ready for what? The truth. I unfolded the letter. His handwriting was shaky, more so than I remembered. But the voice, it was his. "Claire, if you're reading this, then I didn't live long enough to tell you myself. They took it. Not all at once, not with violence, with smiles, with offers, with silence. I designed the coil with Latham because I believed in collaboration. He believed in ownership. The day I showed him the draft, the real one, he smiled and said, 'This will change everything.' A week later, he stopped returning my calls. A month later, I got a letter from Whitlow and Baxter. It offered me $75,000 to step away gracefully. I said no. Then your mother came. She said the family needed me to be still. That innovation wasn't worth legacy. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had built something that would never have my name on it. But I built you, and I believed in you. So I left the real record here with Marion, where I knew it wouldn't be touched. The USB contains the original schematics, time-stamped, with voice memos. One of them has you laughing in the background. You were 6. You're the only one who looked up when no one else cared what I was building. So I'm asking you now, don't let them erase me. Or you. I didn't realize I was crying until Marion placed a cold cloth in my hand. We sat in silence. The letter lay open on the table like a wound. Why didn't you tell anyone, I asked? Because he asked me not to. But you knew. Of course I knew. I also knew the Braddocks don't forgive betrayal, but they do forget inconvenient truths. She stood and walked to the window. He didn't want revenge. He wanted justice. But he knew he couldn't get it with the family circling like vultures. So he left the breadcrumbs for someone who might care. And you think that's me? She turned and looked at me. I don't think. I know. Back in my apartment that night, I plugged in the USB. There were 16 files, 7 schematics, 4 voice memos. One video. I opened the video last. It was Grandpa sitting in the garage, 2004. His hair was thinner, his eyes looked tired but fierce. He spoke directly into the camera. This is for whoever's watching. If you found this, it means the patent wasn't corrected. It means I got erased. But here's the thing, I know what I built. I have proof. And if the world can't handle it, that's on them. But someone will. He paused, then added, Claire, I hope it's you. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in my life, I felt chosen. The next morning I met Janet at her office. I handed her the letter, the USB, the printouts. She didn't speak for a full 5 minutes. Then she said, this isn't just a lawsuit anymore. It's a historical correction, legacy level. So we move forward. Yes, but carefully. This kind of proof. They'll come for us sideways. She wasn't wrong. That afternoon I received an email from a private address. No subject, no name, just a message. You're getting too close. He left it buried for a reason. Walk away. Someone who remembers everything. I forwarded it to Janet. She replied, threats mean pressure. Pressure means they're sweating. Good. Then came the real surprise. A call from the Smithsonian. Someone had forwarded the article about our filing and the rediscovered patent materials. They wanted to discuss archival interest. Janet raised an eyebrow. You're not even done, and already they want your garage. It's not for sale. Didn't think so. But all of that, the email, the call, the weight of momentum faded when I got another letter. Not from a stranger, but from someone I never expected. My father. It was short, neat. Claire. I was wrong not to defend you. I was wrong not to defend him. I don't know if you can ever forgive that, but I hope you win. I folded the letter slowly. Some losses stay, some shift. This one just cracked a little. The courtroom felt colder the second time. Maybe it was just me. Or maybe everyone else felt it too, the shift in gravity, the way a room changes when the truth finally demands to be heard. The file Janet placed on the table was thicker now. The USB drive was labeled. The letter from Walter Braddock was sealed in an archival-grade sleeve. She handled it like a relic, not a weapon, but it was both. We were no longer asking for recognition. We were asking for a correction, for reparation, for acknowledgement that what had been erased had always been there. Mira Hall sat across from us again, but this time her blouse wasn't silk. Her earrings were gone. There were circles beneath her eyes. Stratus and Tech had switched tactics. Less aggression, more concessions. But it was too late for diplomacy. Today wasn't a negotiation. It was reckoning. And I was ready to speak. The judge entered with a subtle nod. Let's begin, she said, flipping through the amended docket. Ms. Braddock's counsel has submitted new evidence for inclusion. Janet stood. Your Honor, we have confirmed provenance of the original coil schematics dated and time-stamped as well as recorded voice memos and a written letter all corroborating Mr. Braddock's Keogh co-authorship of the design. She paused, then added with intent. We also have testimony from a new witness. The judge's brow arched. Name? Janet glanced toward the back of the room. Evan K. Trussell, former junior engineer at Technova Labs, a subcontractor to Stratos in 2003 and 2004. A man rose, gray suit, nervous hands, and eyes that refused to meet Mira's. He was sworn in. Janet approached the bench. Mr. Trussell, can you tell the court what you saw during your time at Technova? He nodded slowly. I reviewed design revisions sent from an off-site collaborator. The initial drafts were tagged WBECL, Walter Braddock, and Edward C. Latham. Janet asked, were both names always included? No. The later versions omitted Braddock. Did you raise any concerns? Yes. I emailed my manager. Do you still have a copy of that email? He opened a folder and held it up. We recovered it from my backup hard drive. I wasn't sure it mattered. Until now. Mira rose sharply. Objection, chain of custody. The judge raised her hand. Will allow preliminary review. The witness is under oath. Mira sat, lips pressed into a tight line. Next came the blueprints. The USB was inserted. Images projected. Dates stamped in 2002. Sketches annotated in Walter's handwriting. Even his voice on the memo instructing Claire not to touch a hot soldering tool. Her laugh, my laugh, echoed through the courtroom speakers. No one spoke. Even the stenographer stopped typing for a moment. Janet approached the bench one final time. For the record, Your Honor, we request that Mr. Walter Braddock be posthumously credited as co-inventor on all patent and licensing documentation for the Latham coil. We also request an inquiry into Stratos acquisition process and a full investigation into suppression of attribution. Then she looked at me. I stood. May I say something, Your Honor? The judge nodded. I walked to the center of the courtroom, aware that every camera, every eye, every former doubter was watching. They thought a garage was a joke. They thought a brass key was worthless. But that garage held more integrity than half the boardrooms in this country. Because my grandfather believed in building quietly, in letting the work speak. And they tried to silence him. I pulled the sealed letter from my coat. This is what they couldn't predict. That a girl no one listened to would be the one to finish what he started. I'm not here for money. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because truth deserves a place in the record. And Walter Braddock deserves to be seen. The judge didn't speak for a long time. Then she leaned forward. Ms. Hall-Mira stood, her tone subdued. Stratos is prepared to enter mediation on the issue of co-authorship. We acknowledge the material is compelling and would not oppose a revised attribution. The courtroom stirred. But the judge held up her hand. This isn't about what your client opposes. It's about what's correct. She turned to the clerk. Proceed with official review. I am granting a preliminary motion to recognize co-inventorship pending federal reassessment. Additionally, I am forwarding evidence of potential misconduct to the Department of Commerce and the USPTO. Bang of the gavel. Motion granted. Outside, the steps of the courthouse were chaotic. Microphones, flashes, questions. I said nothing. I didn't need to, because something bigger than a verdict had just shifted. They had called me the girl who got the garage, but now they call me something else, the woman who brought the blueprint back to life. That night, I sat in the garage one more time. The old tarp was still in the corner. The workbench still bore the burn mark from when I dropped a soldering iron at 11. But something had changed. Not the space. Me. I was no longer trying to prove I belonged. I knew I did. And then my phone buzzed. An email. From someone anonymous. Subject line: Whitlow internal. You'll want this attached: a scanned memo. Braddock attribution must be removed before final filing. Latham requires sole ownership. Confirmed family is aware and complicit. Proceed. Signed R.M. Whitlow. My hands trembled, because now I knew the erasure had been intentional, coordinated, documented. The garage is quieter now, not because the dust has settled, but because I have. There's something sacred about a space where someone once dreamed, where their fingerprints still linger on the wood, where silence wasn't emptiness. It was focus. I sat on the old workbench one last time. Above me, the blueprint Walter drew was framed, cleaned, mounted with museum-grade glass. It used to be folded in the dark. Now it caught morning light through the cracked window like stained glass. His name was on it now. Legally, publicly, permanently. Walter B. Braddock Company, inventor. But this story, our story, didn't end in a courtroom. It was never about just justice. It was about legacy. After the verdict, the headlines rotated for days. Garage Key unlocks patent battle. David beats Goliath Braddock Co., credited after 20 years. The granddaughter who wouldn't let go. Janet's firm was flooded with inquiries. Legal publications begged for interviews. Stratosyntex stock dropped 8 points the week after the court's preliminary ruling. I didn't care about any of it. I cared about the email I got from a high school sophomore in Kansas who wrote, "My teacher told me some people aren't math-minded. I believed her, but your story made me wonder if maybe I'm just quiet, not broken." And the one from a retired engineer in Oregon, I knew Walter in '98. He helped me fix a coil design I'd been stuck on for months and wouldn't even take credit. I'm so glad someone finally told the truth. Those were the real headlines, the ones that mattered. I used part of the settlement, yes, there was one, to clean up the garage. Not tear it down. Do not sell it to a tech museum or franchise it as a coffee shop with storytelling ambiance. No, I kept it. And I opened the door for the first time, not just as a granddaughter, but as a founder. We called it The Bench. A free workshop space for anyone under 25 working on engineering projects without access to labs or funding. No entry fee, no application essays, no GPA requirements. Just bring your mind, bring your hands, and don't be afraid to build quietly. We started with 6 kids. Now there are 32. One of them, Mateo 17, rebuilt a wind-powered desalinator from parts he found behind a scrapyard. Another, Amina, designed a low-voltage battery pack for disaster relief zones that could fit in a shoebox. They don't call me Ms. Braddock, they call me Claire. And sometimes they ask me why I never went back into tech. I always say, because I didn't want to build for companies anymore. I wanted to build builders. One Thursday morning she came, my mother. I saw her through the garage window before she knocked. Hair still perfect, shoes are still beige, hands gripping a leather clutch like it held her spine together. I met her at the door. She didn't ask to come in. I didn't ask her to explain. She looked around, said softly, "I thought it would smell like dust or disappointment." I said nothing. Then she added, "But it smells like copper and light." She handed me a small envelope. Her hand shook. "It's not an apology. I don't think I've earned that yet. But it's something you should have." I took it, waited until she was gone to open it. Inside, a photo. I was at the age 7, sitting on the workbench, legs swinging. Grandpa is beside me, a soldering iron in hand. We were both laughing. On the back, in her handwriting, "You were always more like him than I wanted to admit." I pinned it next to the blueprint, for no one else's eyes but mine. The Smithsonian reached out again, this time not for the garage, but for the voice memos. They wanted to preserve them as part of a new exhibit titled "Erased No More Hidden Contributors in American Innovation." I said yes, but only on one condition: that Walter's voice played right next to mine. Side by side, teacher and student, inventor and witness. Then I wrote a letter. Not for court, not for the press, just for him. "Grandpa, you once said the future is built in silence while the world is too busy laughing. Well, they're not laughing anymore. The coil is yours again. The truth is yours again. And I finally believe that being quiet doesn't mean being small. You taught me that. Thank you for the key, for the bench, for believing in someone no one else even noticed. We're building again. And this time, they can't erase us. One of the students, Aria 12, made a sign for the front of the garage, hand-painted, uneven letters, splattered with fingerprints. But it said everything welcome to the bench, for the quiet ones who never stopped thinking. The day we hung it up, it rained. The kind of summer rain that smells like new beginnings. We stood under the awning, huddled laughing. Then someone said, "Let's open the door anyway." And we did. The garage door groaned the way it always had, like it was clearing its throat before letting the light in. And when it rose all the way, the rain poured in. But so did the future. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with headlines or verdicts. Sometimes it lingers in blueprints smudged with memory, in voices nearly lost to silence, and in those brave enough to hold the line when history tries to let go. Thank you for watching, and never forget, you don't need a crowd to prove your worth. You just need the courage to keep standing quietly, steadily. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.